This video will be factoring trinomials. It's part 2 of a series on factoring. So for the first, well, actually for both examples that are shown, I am dealing with not only a trinomial. Tri means 3. So as I mentioned in part 1 of the series, there's 3 terms here. So that's why it's called trinomials. But in addition to being known as a trinomial, it's also a quadratic expression because my highest degree or power or exponent is 2. And it's an expression because it is several terms separated by operations, but they're not set equal to anything. If it was equal to something, it would be an equation, but that's neither here nor there. Also, quick review on standard form. A standard form of a polynomial, or a quadratic in this case, is ax squared plus bx plus c. Of course, the operation doesn't have to be a plus sign. This is just the standard form so that you're not constantly changing out your operations. The way that I am going to focus on factoring is I'm going to tell you to look at your A and your C. So I call it the AC method. People call it different things. A is the number that's in front of your x squared. If you don't see a number, then it's 1. So right now we have a leading coefficient of 1. My factored version of this quadratic equation or trinomial is going to be in the form of 2 binomials, which means I'm going to set up 2 sets of parentheses. For my guess and check, it is literally how it sounds. I'm guessing and I'm checking. So the first term, I'm trying to find factors that will multiply to give me x squared. So that's going to be x times x. How do I know? Because when I multiply exponents, I'm going to add them. So when they have the same base, x times x is x, but the exponents 1 plus 1 will end up being x squared. So this part is taken care of. Now what I have to do is focus on this last term, which is my C term, including that sign. And I want to make sure that not only do I find factors that will give me 4, but they also have to add to give me -5. So we know that we can multiply 2 times 2, and that would give us 4. But if we were to add it, would it give us -5? No, it wouldn't. So we know that those are not the answers that are going to go inside of our parentheses. How about form 1? Well, if you manipulate the signs, yes, that would work. There is a pattern that will work for you. If you ever see, I'm all over the place, sorry. If you see that your B term is negative, that means that your bigger number out of your factors has to take on that same sign. So between 4 and 1, my bigger number is 4. So I know 4 also has to be negative. If I see that the sign in front of C is positive, that means that both factors will have that exact same sign, whatever the sign of B was. So that means both will be negative. So -4 and -1 not only multiply to give me a +4, but when I add them, they do in fact give me that -5 that I'm looking for. That is how you do the guess and check. And then again, if you wanted to check it to make sure it's correct, I like to make 2 little smiley faces, one for my middle terms and then one for my outer terms. So the middle term will be multiplied -4 times x, which is -4x. And then the outer terms is x times -1, which is simply -1x. Now, when I add those, I do get the -5x that I was looking for. So that's my answer. My other method is my box method. The box method tells me that what I'm going to do is put that first term inside of the first box. So let's go ahead and set this box up. My first term is x squared, and my last term is a +4, and it's going to go in the last box. What I'm looking to do is multiply my A times my C. And again, my A is what's in front of x squared. If there's nothing there that you can see, it's understood to be a 1 there. So 1 times 4, again, is 4. Same thing. I'm looking for 2 factors that will multiply to give me 4, but they will add to give me the middle term, which is -5x. We've already determined that it's going to be -4 and -1. Now, in terms of my box, it does not matter if I put the -4 in the first box or if I put it in if I put it in the second box or the third, it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go with -1x here and -4x here. What does matter is that you include the x. So if you're doing the box method correctly, every box should have a variable in it, except for this last one, if your problem starts out looking like this. Make sure you understand that. So the reason I chose to put the -4 in the third box instead of the second, and again, it doesn't matter, is because I like to start off going to the left. For the first row, what do they have in common? For the second row, what do they have in common? Well, for the second row, I see they both have a 4, but I also want to pay attention to the sign. The sign that's closest to me is the sign that I'm going to bring out. So that's why I chose the 4 on this one, but it's a -4. Notice I did not bring out a variable because that fourth box doesn't have a variable. So on my first row, and normally I would do that first, I just want to show you the 4s. What I have in common is an x, just one x. Why? Because the second box does not have another, it only has one x. It doesn't have x squared, so I can't bring out 2 x's. And then what I want to do is I want to, let me bring this down so I'll have room to write. What I want to do now is I want to factor going upward, or I can just think of it like a multiplication table. So x times what will give me x squared? It's just simply going to be x, right? And then x times what will give me -1x, simply -1. Again, the sign that's closest to where I'm about to write is the sign that comes out. And what you'll notice is on the outside, you have your factors, which are the same factors I just used in my guess and check. So my answer here is x minus 4, or the quantity of, times the quantity of x minus 1. Does it matter if I put quantity of x minus 1 times quantity of x minus 4? Nope, it does not. It's still the same thing. It's just like me saying 3 times 4 is the same as 4 times 3. It doesn't matter when you're multiplying which order you put it in. It's your preference. All right, now for grouping, I am going to use the same problem. What I'm going to do is bring down my first and my last term, but I'm going to leave some space in between. So my first term, my last term. In between, I'm going to take those two numbers I came up with as my factors, but I have to remember to put the x's with them. Again, I see a 4 right here. So I'm asking myself, I want to be strategic. I don't have to do it this way. Which one of these numbers, the -4 or -1, would make more sense to go with that 4? And that's the order I want to put it in. But it will still work if you don't put it in that order. The reason I'm saying that is because now when I'm grouping it, I'm going to group the first 2 and the last 2. So for the first 2, what do they have in common? Well, they both have an x. What's left over is once I divide x squared by that x that I just pulled out, I have 1x left over. -1x divided by that x that I just pulled out will leave me with -1. On the other side, I have to be careful. If I start off with the negative sign, I am going to bring out a negative sign, and it's going to affect that next sign. So I have to pay attention. What's left over when I divide -4x by -4 is simply x. What's left over when I divide +4 by -4 is -1. And what I will notice is that I have a new GCF. So that GCF is going to come out as its own parentheses, and what's left over goes in its set of parentheses, x minus 4. So again, notice it's the same answer. And I told you that the order did not matter. You can have the quantity of x minus 1 first. It doesn't matter. Same answer, different strategies. So that is how you would do example 1. For example 2, we now have a leading coefficient that's greater than 1. So I'm going to do the guess and check again. For my first, let's go here. My first set of parentheses, I'm personally just going to go ahead and put my 2 in here. And then I know the only thing that will allow me to get 2n squared is to multiply it times n. So this is where the problem may come in for some people. Now I'm trying to look at 45. What are 2 factors that I can multiply here that's going to allow me to end up with a -23 as to replace my negative 23. So I could say 9 and 5 and just guess and check. This is a longer way of doing it, but this is what you can do. So using my smiley face, I have 9 in, and I have 2 times 5, which is 10. Well, if I add those, that's not going to give me negative 23. Even if I were to change the signs, it's still not going to give me negative 23. So let's change the position, because the numbers may be right, but the position may be wrong. So maybe we'll put the 5 first and then the 9. Let's try that. If we did that, now we have 5 in, and we have 2 times 9, which is 18 in, and we get the 23 in. However, we're looking for a negative 23 in. So that tells me, well, we know the bigger number has to take this sign. So the bigger number is negative 18 or 18. So negative 18 and 5 would not give me a negative 23. If I look at this, I see that both signs have to be the same sign, which is B. And so therefore, if I had a negative 5 and a negative 18, I do in fact get that negative 23 in. In addition, negative 5 times negative 18 gives me 45 times 2, which is A times C. That's 90, right? So I know that if I were to use this information and multiply it out, that will end up, I will end up right back where I started. Let's look at it from the box method. Using the box method, the first term goes in the first box. That's 2n squared. The last term goes in the last box. Multiply A times C, which is 2 times 45. That's going to give me 90. We already know the answer, but if we did not know the answer, what you could do if you don't know, because you don't want to just guess and check and say 30 times 3 or 10 times 9 and just keep going on and on. If you have a graphing calculator, what you could do is go to your y equals whatever your A times C is. In this case, it's 90 divided by x. Go to the second line, type the same thing in, 90 divided by x, but this time you also want to add another x. What you're doing is you're going to try to find some factors that will help you out here. So you're going to go to second graph, which is going to pull up your table. In your last column, you're looking for whatever your middle term was. Your middle term was negative 23, and that matters because if you look on this table, the very last line for the last columns shows a positive 23. We don't want a positive 23. So what you want to do once you locate the number in your third column for B is you want to look in front of it. Those are your 2 factors. So it's telling me negative 5 and negative 18 are the numbers that I want to actually use in my box. So when I'm using that in my box, it does not matter which order. So I said negative 18, negative 5, which we already knew from our first example. For 2, if I'm looking for what's close, again, it doesn't matter which one that I use, but I personally like to strategize it based off of which one of these numbers will have something in common with 2. Probably the negative 18, right? So negative 18, and what do I have to do? I have to also add that variable. And then I go to the next one, negative 5n. Why? Because if I combine those, that's going to give me that negative 23. I'm trying to replace that negative 23 with those 2 numbers. So now what I'm doing is I am going to factor out on my first row. What do they have in common? Well, they both can be divided by the greatest common factor of 2n. And even if I just have that number, I have enough to complete my box. So 2n times what will give me 2n squared, another n. Oops. And then 2n times what will give me negative 18n, negative 9. You see that? And now I can take this n that's at the top, n times what will give me negative 5n, negative 5. And if I'm doing this correctly, negative 5 times negative 9 is that positive 45. So there's more than one way to set up the box, but what you will notice is I have the same factors that I had a few minutes ago. It's just a different strategy. Finally, over here, using grouping, I'm going to take the same strategy that I did a few minutes ago, using the first term, 2n squared, leave some space in the last term, plus 45. And the space is going to be filled with the two numbers that I just came up with. And again, I want to be strategic. What can I factor out with 2? The negative 18. So negative 18n and then negative 5n. That is replacing my negative 23n. Now what I want to do is I want to divide them out. The first 2 go together and the last 2 go together. What is the common factor between 2 and negative 18? Well, it's going to be 2. And then as far as n squared and n, it's going to be n. What's left over? N minus 9. Where did I get that from? Taking this term, dividing it by 2n, what's left over? And then taking this term and dividing it by 2n, what's left over? Which is negative 9. Now I go to the other side. I have a negative sign, so I'm going to pull out a negative something. Well, this the last term doesn't have a variable, so I know there's not going to be a variable involved, but I have a number. I can divide both by 5. What's left over is n, and then 45 divided by negative 5, negative 9. If I am doing this correctly, what I will see is that my new greatest common factor looks exactly the same in the parentheses. So I'm going to pull that out as n minus 9. And then what's left over on the outside goes in its own set of parentheses, 2n minus 5. Same answer as I've been getting all along. It's just the order is different, but that's based on how you set it up. So the answer, oops, sorry about that. So the answer for this one, come on, is going to be the quantity of 2n minus 5 times the quantity of n minus 9. And double check it. 2n times n, 2n squared. And then 2n times negative 9 is going to be negative 18n. And then you go to the second term and do the same thing. Negative 5 times n, negative 5n. So we already did that. And so we know that's negative 23n. And then the last thing is the negative 5 times negative 9, which is going to be positive 45. So if you set it up correctly, you're going to end up right back where you started. This is what we started with. This is just a different way of writing it. And as a bonus, I don't teach it this way, but some people see it better this way. The bonus method is called the slip and slide. And I've seen swing method. They call it different things. I don't teach it, so this is, all right. So what you want to do is you're trying to get your leading coefficient out of the way so it'll look like, it'll look simplified to you. So what you're going to do is take that, you're going to multiply it times your last term or your constant, which is c. So in this case, when I rewrite this, it's going to be n squared minus 23n plus whatever 45 times 2 is, which is 90, right? So then what you're going to do is now you're going to factor it the way that you would normally factor it. And we already know that a times c is going to be 90, and over to the side that we had negative 18 and negative 5. So those are the two numbers that are going to take the place of my second term. N squared is simply going to be n times itself. So I'm taking these two numbers, and that's what I'm putting here, negative 18 and negative 5. I don't like this method because students are going to just stop and say, oh, I'm done, but you're not, because when you multiply this back out, guess what? You're supposed to have a 2n squared. You don't, you have an n squared. So what do? Now you go to your constant and you're going to divide it by that initial leading coefficient that you moved. So now you're going to simplify. If you can simplify it, great. If not, what's going to end up happening is you're going to have to slide it back to that position that you took it from. So n and then negative 18 divided by 2. Yes, I can simplify that. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Now over here, I can't simplify the negative 5 divided by 2. So I'm going to have to slide this on back. So when I do that, that's going to be 2n minus 5. Ta-da, right back where you started. So that's the same answer that we just had up here. And again, the only thing that I did different is I just changed the order. So I hope that helped you guys. So thumbs up and subscribe. Have an awesome one.